everyone, and welcome to the Unmuted Conversations podcast with yours truly, Latasha Renee. I am so glad that you guys have joined me again for another episode on tonight, and you guys are in for a treat. Tonight's session will be entitled The Art of Co-Parenting. So, if you are someone who you have questions, if you're struggling, if you don't know what you're doing when it comes to co-parenting your children, I have some amazing guests on tonight who is going to help. They're going to give you some tips, tools, and strategies on how to perfect the art of co-parenting. So again, I am so glad that you joined us on tonight. Just know that here at the Unmuted Conversations podcast, we're all about unmuting your message and sharing your story with the world. So, like I said, I have two amazing guests on tonight. One of my guests is hailing all the way from Wichita, Kansas, and the other one is from Lakeland, Florida. I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you on tonight, and they're going to share their amazing story. And then we want you to just join in with some dialogue on tonight. So, I'm going to bring them to the stage and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. I have Kristen Rice here. She is a licensed marriage family therapist. I also have joining us on tonight Miss Giovanna Cirillo. She is here on tonight, and I'm going to let them both introduce themselves to you, share a little bit about themselves. We're going to start with you, Miss Giovanna.
Hello, everyone. My name is Giovanna Cirillo. I am a mental health coach, a life coach. I am a mother of one. I am currently residing in Lakeland, Florida, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me as a guest today.
All right, and then I have Kristen, Miss Kristen Rice. Introduce yourself and let the people meet you.
Thanks, Latasha. So I'm Kristen Rice. I am in Wichita, Kansas, and a licensed marriage and family therapist here. I'm also a wife and a mom of two teen boys, so we have a busy household. And I'm excited to get to join you guys today.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you guys on the Unmuted podcast, Unmuted Conversations podcast show tonight. I just want to jump right in. Like I said, we're going to be talking about the art of co-parenting, and we know that co-parenting can be a blessing to some, a curse for others. But we're going to talk about it all on tonight. I'm going to allow both of you to share a little bit of your story so that people can kind of get an understanding of who you are and just your area of expertise. And so that way we'll know that you guys know what you're talking about on tonight. Most of my audience knows I'm not a parent. So I brought in the experts on tonight, y'all. So I'm learning as y'all are learning, my audience here. And so I'm going to allow Giovanna to tell a little bit of her story, how she got to where she is, and then followed by Kristen.
Okay. So, once again, my daughter is 16 years old. So, I've been doing this for almost 10 to 11 years, co parenting. How it came about, me and her dad were not necessarily married. I wasn't necessarily saved at this point in time in my life. And so, we met, we hit it off, and I found out that I was pregnant. And so, he was really in the street life at this point in time. And I was at the point where I was growing up, like maturing. I didn't really want the same thing for my life.
Yeah.
And I was about maybe 5 to 6 months pregnant when I found out I was pregnant.
Wow.
Yes. So it was a surprise for me. And when I found out, I'm like, oh my God, I'm pregnant. And so I was ready to end it with him. And that didn't change my decision. I was still bold enough to say, I called him, I said, hey, I can't do this anymore with you. Things are not moving. And by the way, I'm pregnant. Click, hung up the phone. and when people hear this story, they're like, well, that was bold and brutal. Yes. And I'm like, listen, I was ready. And just because I was ready to have a child doesn't mean that I was going to stay with him. Like, it was just like, I just couldn't do that to myself. Because if I'm ready to end it now, then why would a child change anything?
Yeah.
That was my mindset.
Yeah.
And so, time passed on. I got saved. And I'm like, you know what? I'm ready to leave New Jersey because I'm originally from New Jersey. And I'm like, I'm ready to go. And so as I was ready to leave, I communicated with him to let him know, like, hey, this is a story. I'm ready to leave. And he was fine with it. When I finally got into a place of moving, and ended up in North Carolina, is when things started to get, I'm not going to go too far, but that's when things started to get a little tricky for me. So I'll leave it there. So that's my background for now. We'll get deeper into that.
Okay. Kristen. All right, Kristen, your turn.
Well, like I said, I'm a wife and a mother, and I've been married 21 years. So I don't have that experience co-parenting as a wife and a mom, but I did grow up with divorced parents. They divorced when I was about first grade. And so I got to watch that process of my parents learning to navigate that. And it really was a learning process. I mean, we're talking the 80s when, yeah, I'm that old, when divorce wasn't as common. There weren't a lot of resources. And so I'm sure it was hard for my parents. So I learned from that. And now I have the opportunity to walk couples through from all stages, at all stages of their marriage and separation, and how they're going to work with their kids going forward. And so I really am honored to get to be a part of that process and help guide that with the people who come in for therapy.
Yeah. Kristen, do you think that your personal experience as a child, do you think it has influenced, how you look at co-parenting now, or how you help your clients or anything like that? Like your personal background?
You can't turn off your person, like it's there.
Yeah.
Of course, I do believe it is. And I saw things that my parents did great, and I saw things that maybe my parents could have improved a little bit, but I know that they were working through their own stuff.
Yeah.
And that helps me understand just how hard that process is for the people walking through this. It's not like you can just check all the boxes and put aside your emotions in it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, do you have any advice for someone who is at that beginning stage, like how Giovanna had mentioned, how when she found out, she was like, "Oop, we're done, I'm moving on," or like when you were a child, like any type of advice that you would have to someone who's at the beginning stages of that? Listen, we're not going to be together, but we have a child together. How to navigate that co-parenting journey? Like in the beginning, what advice could you give to someone who's starting out?
Oh man, I could write a book. There's so many decisions facing you at that point.
Yeah.
And it really depends a lot on the age of the child, but where are we living and where are they going to school? And is any of that going to have to change? And how are we going to communicate? And how are we going to manage doctors and babysitters and soccer practice? There's just, I think that's the hardest part, is because not only are you managing the separation at that point, and if it's a divorce, you're going through all the legal stuff, all the financial decisions, but then you've got all these other decisions about childcare and how to work together for that. And I think that's the hardest part right there.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that, Giovanna? Do you have,
honestly,
starting out?
I mean, when I was just winging it. I had no idea what I was doing. I just had faith that, I was able to do it regardless of who was going to be there. And, looking at my support team, I spoke to my mom, obviously. I had family members that were able to support me at that point in time. And so I would just say, have faith, have faith in yourself that you're capable to do it, because sometimes we think we can't. We think that, how am I going to do this by myself? I can't. It's impossible. But, you can. And I'm not saying that you should, but you can.
Exactly. And I think that's the one thing about, us as women, we're going to make it happen. We are going to do what we got to do to make sure our children are taken care of, whether, I don't have children, but I have nieces and nephews that they are my babies, and we're going to make it happen if they need something, so that's the one thing about us, is that, we're going to figure it out. That's just who we are as women. But we do know that when it comes to big life changes like co-parenting, there can be some challenges. Giovanna, what would you say some of your initial challenges were? Because even though like, I'm going to do it, I'm going to figure it out. I've made my decision. I don't want to be with him. But then that may look like you relocating, or now you're a single mom. So what were those challenges, some of those initial challenges that you faced, and how did you get through it?
Well, first and foremost, the agreement on how the legality of it all. I was in the process of moving again to North Carolina, and I thought that we were okay. We had a verbal agreement.
Okay.
When I got to North Carolina, I received a letter in the mail. It was like the same day. I didn't even get to unpack. Wow. And I got a letter in the mail saying that I had to go back to New Jersey to go to court and go through, not custody battles, but through visitation rights.
Yeah.
And I was like, I wasn't upset that he did that. I was upset that I just got here. Like, how am I going to be able to go back to New Jersey? Yeah. And so I wasn't able to make the court date. And so everything ruled in his favor.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the favor was that every holiday, during spring break, during school break, that he would get her. And, we would have to split the cost. Because of my immaturity and my age at that point, I would say the challenges that I faced was communication. I was very angry and very bitter towards, even though I was saved. Can we talk about it?
Yeah. Yep.
Even
talk
though
about it.
Saved, I had just gotten saved, mind you. I was still navigating the new world and new creation, but I still had some anger towards him. And so the communication process was the first and foremost. Like, I didn't want to communicate with him at all. Okay. Because in my mindset, it was like, now all of a sudden you want to step up, but who am I to judge him at that point in time? But to me, and at that point, my immaturity was, oh, now you want to step, now that I'm gone, you want to do this. So that was my mindset. And so, a lot of the challenges were communication. And then of course, our first year of actually implementing the visitation rights, who's going to pay for it? The cost. So now we have this, and now are we prepared for this? We brought it to court. Are we ready to do this? And so we had to navigate that. Who was going to come out of pocket first? We had to create a system. And at the beginning, it was hard because we were both not financially correct. So I would say that would be like the finances and the communication were challenges.
Right. Now, has the communication over time, did the communication get better? Because how would you, I know that I have people in my life, really, really close friends who they're kind of in that same situation where the two parents don't get along at all. And so communication is rough. There's no contact for, 28 days at a time sometimes. And so what kind of, and now this is for both of you guys, what kind of advice would you give to someone where they are struggling with communication? Either the other parent is disrespectful, or they don't want to budge, or they're being difficult, or so is there any advice you could give to someone who's in that position where communication is challenging? What would you guys say?
Well, okay, so I guess I'll go first, and then we'll hit it with the expertise. She'll correct me if I'm wrong. But honestly, I would say, within time, it does get better because now we can communicate without a major disagreement or a major argument. When time passes, we mature. Our mindset starts to change. Everything starts to change. Our perspective starts to change. So at the beginning, I would say give yourself some grace. It's hard. Let's start with the grace. Give him grace. Give her grace. Give each other grace, because no one expected this. No one expected the disconnection and having to co-parent. And so it's going to be tough for both parties. So give each other grace. If you find out your communication style. Are you a texter?
Yeah.
Is he a talker? Whatever the case might be, find out. Whatever communication, as long as there's some communication. And then setting out a time. Because with me in particular, he was very hard to deal with. And so I didn't want to talk to him. I'm going to be honest. I didn't want to talk to him. I'm like, even here, you take it. Talk to him. Because to me, he didn't have to talk to me. In reality, all you need to talk to is your daughter. That was my mindset. As I got older, obviously that changes. Still, I'm like, here, talk to him. Because I don't want to talk to him. But you have to kind of prepare your mind.
Yeah.
To be like, okay, do I have the mental capacity today to say, I'm going to talk to him and we're going to talk about whatever we need to talk about. That's what I do. He'll text me now and be like, hey, do you have time? And I'll be like, I'll text you when I have some time. And I prepare myself. I'm like, okay, this conversation can go sideways at any point. I don't want to call him when I'm having a bad day. I don't want to call him when I'm in a bad mood or something happened, because I want to be able to handle this conversation in a mature way. And so I call him when I'm ready. That's my advice. But you gotta
Okay.
get ready. You have to be ready at any point. Like, you can't never be ready.
Yeah. Well, all right,
I just hear
Kristen,
you
come on with it.
on having to put on that armor, like getting ready to go into battle is what it sounds like. That is hard because in a lot of these cases, you guys have a history
Mhm.
and there's a reason you're not together anymore.
Right.
And part of that probably has to do with communication patterns that have happened over and over and over
Yeah.
and have gone poorly over and over
Yes.
and over.
Yes.
And those haven't changed. So
Yeah.
even though the relationship status has changed, those patterns are still there. And you're still afraid of getting sucked into that one more time. And when I think about patterns, a lot of times, it's just us asking for our needs to be met. So it's perhaps the woman saying to her husband, I just need you to be there and I feel alone in this. And it feels like I'm doing it all. But you know how that comes out is a lot of times like, how come you never do the dishes?
Yes. Yeah.
That's how we ask for
Correct.
connection sometimes when we're not feeling well. How come you don't do this? Why are you not doing that? But they don't hear us saying, I'm alone. They hear us saying, you just failed me. You are a horrible husband.
Mhm.
And so those mismatches happen in communication over and over. And so you go into that again after the divorce expecting those same things to show up again. So it really takes a whole mindset shift when you're changing these kinds of relationships from what used to be a really intimate relationship and going into really more of a business relationship. So instead of expecting those needs to be met and then just going in there going, this is going to go poorly, I already know how this is going to go, you would go into it more of a formal manner. Here's the contract, here's the purpose of why we're here. Just
Mhm.
go into a meeting, here's the agenda, we're going to get through the agenda, it's not personal. And moving from that takes a lot of work because you guys
Yeah.
have that history, you know that stuff about each other, you know all that intimate details, you know their hopes and their fears and their dreams and what really gets under their skin. And it's hard to put that aside and just say, okay, this is where our daughter went this week, and here's the money that needs to be shared, and I need to arrange next weekend with you.
Yeah, that's actually really, really good information that you both said. Like even with Giovanna, you talked about giving your ex partner grace. I think that's so important because I think for the most part, both parties are trying to figure it out. And it's like Kristen, you said no one went into it thinking you don't get me. No one gets married to get divorced, and no one go into a relationship to break up. You know what I mean? So things happen, and then now you have this child that's kind of caught in the middle or having to navigate both sides. And so, but I think listening to you guys, what I'm hearing also is boundaries. Knowing how to effectively implement those boundaries, set those boundaries, implement them, is important too, so that you don't have unnecessary arguments or someone just kind of like disrupting your peace. So just to piggyback off of that, what boundaries do you think are essential when it comes to establishing a co-parenting relationship? I'll start with you, Kristen.
All right. The first thing I look at is the kids. Get the kids
Yeah.
out of the middle.
That's good.
Keep them out of the arguments. Keep them out of the back and forth. Don't use them as tools in your weapon in your arguments with each other.
Yes.
And that can come out in really subtle ways sometimes. Sometimes I'll hear a parent saying, oh, your child really misses you and really wants you to move back home.
Yeah.
No, that's something the child gets to talk with the other parent about. That's not something that goes through the other parent.
Right.
Or a lot of times parents may be tempted to send messages or paperwork back and forth with the kid, have the kid be the one giving that. And that's such a hard position for a child to be in because they know that's going to make the other parent upset. And here they are torn.
Yeah.
Or we're also very often tempted to have all those hard conversations during transferring the child from one home to the other. Instead of staying focused on, no, right now it's about the kid.
Yeah.
It's about getting the kids settled from one place to another. But Like you said, we have to put on that armor and really be ready for when we're going to have those conversations. And sometimes it's like, oh, I can grab a hold of you right now. So I just got to tell you about this bill that came in the mail.
Right.
And it's really hard for us to put that aside and say, no, right now it's about the kids.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I've seen that happen too, with just in my people in my family, and even with my friends, where that thing with sending messages through the child, it's so common. And so I'm glad that you brought that up, just as a point. That's not a wise thing to do, because it does kind of, put that child in the middle. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. So I hope that, even the people who are listening tonight, they can kind of understand that maybe they want to rethink how they do that, because I know a lot of people who use their child as the messenger, and that's definitely not healthy. Giovanna, you have anything you want to add to that as well?
I definitely agree. That was one thing
Yeah.
that I upheld from the very beginning. Like, first of
Yeah.
all, we're not going to include her in any of our arguments or disagreements. I set a boundary where I'm not even talking bad about him in front of her.
That's a good one.
And I like, Kristen, that you said about using them as a weapon, like using them all to say, oh, well, you're not going to see your child. Like, that was never me.
Yeah.
And it could have been because of my background, where I didn't grow up without a father, but I wasn't going to do that to her. I was always going to make her available to him, despite of our disagreements, despite of our arguments. I was never going to say, oh, no, you can't talk to your father, because that's, to me, is toxic. It's unhealthy. And you're doing it from a selfish place, a manipulative place. You're not thinking about the child. It's the child that we're thinking about. And so I completely agree with those boundaries. More boundaries, like even with personal life, sometimes we'll get into conflict, or maybe he'll feel like he can call at whatever time.
Right.
And no, we're not going to do that, because you're not my man, you're not my husband anymore. Now we have to set boundaries where if you want to talk to your daughter, then you can call her, because now she has a phone, or we can arrange a time, maybe tomorrow at a different time. But you can't just feel that you can contact me at any time.
Right.
So that to me is important too, because then they feel like they still have some type of, access to you because of your child. And you have access, but to an extent. Right. I don't play no games. You have access to an extent, honey.
Just so we're clear.
Yes.
Right.
So I would definitely agree with Kristen on that.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. And y'all are making some amazing points tonight. Y'all are definitely helping our audience. I know that you are, because like I said, there's so many people who are just lost and just not sure what to do. So I'm glad that you guys are joining us on tonight and are helping some of our listeners, because I know that this is just good information for them. I do want to ask another question. Actually, one of my friends brought this to me. And so I want to make sure that I ask this. What do you do? What advice would you give to someone in a co-parenting situation where the child prefers the other parent? So let's say, the child you have custody, you're the mom. But let's say the child that child prefers her father. And maybe y'all are not in a good place, but she prefers her father. How would you navigate that? Trying to do what you guys said, keeping the best interest of the child, at hand, but also you're the mom and you're like, you're my baby. So, Kristen, I'll start with you. Like, what advice would you give to someone if the child prefers the other parent?
That's not unusual. And children, as they grow and as they change, that goes back and forth. So it doesn't mean they're always going to prefer that parent.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm curious, like, hey, what is it that you love about being over at dad's house?
Right.
Tell me about that.
Yeah.
And leaving that space open for them to really be honest about that without making them feel like they're going to hurt your feelings, that you're going to get upset. Tell me, what is it that you love? Why are you wanting right now to be over with dad? And maybe it comes out that their best friend lives next door. Okay, so you want more time with your best friend.
Yeah.
What if I help you arrange sometimes when your best friend can come over here? We can problem solve it when we find out what it is they're preferring.
Gotcha. Giovanna?
That's a great point. That's what I would do as well. Like, what I would have a sit down. A lot of us would automatically get upset and be like, oh, you want to go with your father? What you want to go over there for? You want to go with your mother? What are they doing for you that I'm not doing? Let's stop that.
Yeah.
Let's really, really, really find out what's going on with the child that they're feeling this way. Like, so I would ask my daughter, I would ask her, like, is there something that you're not getting here that you feel like you can get there? Is it, we got to be able to have these conversations with them, because they're able, they're humans just as us, and they have needs. And if they're not getting those needs, then we need to find out how we can provide that for them. And then if they feel like, maybe I want to, then I would have allowed her to maybe spend maybe a weekend over there. But in reality, I wouldn't get upset, but I would figure out what's the core. Where is this coming from? What's this stemming from? And how can we fix it?
Right, absolutely. So I think that's very important. What I'm hearing is communication between you and the child. That is especially, and when we're in a day and time where communication, effective communication isn't always popular. So just really just sitting down and saying, hey, well, what is it about, your dad that you want to go, so I think that's so important. And not taking things personal, not getting in your feelings or feeling like you're inadequate as a mom or as the one, because like you said, it could be something as simple as my best friend's next door. And then like Kristen said, we can kind of navigate that. So I think it's also important that the child feels that there's a sense of safety and stability. And of course, that's, they obtain that with communication. That's one way that kids can feel safe and they can feel like they're in a stable environment. Are there any other ways that you feel like you can use so that a child feels safe and secure with you or even with the other parent? Any kind of tools or strategies for that, would you guys say?
Anytime that you're talking with your kids, whether they're coming to you with a complaint about the other parent's house or something the other parent does, I always say, in order to keep them out of the middle, focus on the emotion the kid is bringing to you and not the details of what's coming. So that might look like, I hate being over at dad's house. Oh man, it's really hard for you. Tell me what's hard for you. Not like not making dad out to be a bad person, or man, mom's new boyfriend is just really awful, and you want to find out, like, okay, what's happening with mom's new boyfriend, but connecting with their emotion of it instead, even when they're disappointed. Let's say the other parent promised to show up and they don't show that weekend. Instead of throwing that parent under the bus, you're like, oh man, they do this to you every time. They're such a horrible parent. You just connect with that emotion that the kid's bringing to you right then and say, I hear how disappointed you are. That must feel awful. What do we do when somebody disappoints? And just coach them through it, because they're going to have lots of opportunities in life to use those skills.
Yeah.
And if you rescue them from that right there and you try to solve it for them, they just missed out on the opportunity to feel competent and capable of managing their own stuff.
Wow, that's good. Wow, that's good. Giovanna, you have anything that you want to add or anything?
I would say, just finding out letting her know, or your child know, that they matter, and whatever they say, whatever they feel matters. Because a lot of the times we feel like, well, you have no choice. How many times have our kids heard that? You have no choice. Yeah. And so, we want them to know that where they're going, that it's going to be okay. And then also communicating, like what I found that her dad was doing was every year, and I give him his props for this. Every year he would contact me and say, before she goes over there, he'll say, what's new with her? What's going on?
Oh, that's good.
What is she into? What's going on? Reading books, so that when she gets to his house, into his home, she feels a level of comfort, a level of safety. Okay, I'm not just coming from one environment to a completely different environment, but and he actually has some input and some awareness of what I like, and I'm not just coming in here like and it's just I'm not at home. And so they want to know that where they're going, both here, there, wherever they're going, that they're at home, that they feel loved, and that they're cared about. So I think that is like just. And communication, like there's a lot of times where, she has some things to say about her visit.
Yeah.
And, I had to bring it to his attention, because I'm not going to say, well, that's your father, then, you just got to deal with it. At the same time, you have to respect, but you better believe that I'm going to approach him regarding it, because I care about what you're saying. I want you to be comfortable when you get there. And I want him to understand that how you work, your emotions, how you process things. Because he's not with her throughout the whole year. So
Right.
he's with her for this little bit of time. He has to relearn her new emotions because she's probably a year older. You know, she's 16 now, so we all know how that goes.
Yeah.
And so, just kind of like keeping everyone, we're always communicating on what's going on and what we can do better. And so just, I think, again, it comes down to communication to ensure that safety and that, level of healthiness.
Absolutely. Well, what do you think you got? What would you do if your parenting styles are different? So let's say you do one thing at your house, Giovanna, but then when it's the turn to go to her dad, let's say he lives a totally different lifestyle than you do. Let's say you're saved, but he's not, or even with you, Kristen, you have a client where the mom doesn't have it together, but the dad does, but they have a co-parenting situation, and so it can get a little touchy. What advice would you give to, someone who's navigating that space where lifestyles are different? My child is one way here, but then has to do another thing here. What advice would you give someone? Because we know that's a thing. I know we all have either experienced it or know someone who is. So please help our audience tonight.
Like Giovanna said, one of the great ways to increase that communication is do what they call like a State of the Union. Whenever you're transferring, whether it's only been 3 days and you've got like 3 days on, 3 days off, or if it's a yearly visit, give them an update, give them the social update, give them the, here's what's going on health-wise, here's what's going on at school, but also understanding that nobody, even married couples, parents the same.
Yeah.
That's never a thing.
Yeah.
At least not the people that I've met. So I don't know that it's realistic to ever expect that the parenting styles are going to be the same. And so then we look at, okay, how do we do this with different parenting styles?
Mm-hmm.
And couples come up with different ways, couples who can really work together and maybe they can keep that same bedtime when, you're at mom's house and when you're at dad's house. That's fabulous for kids. That consistency is great. And it doesn't always happen.
Right.
Very often you're going to have one parent that lets them stay up all night and then they come back to the other parent and the parent's like, oh, I've got this horrible adjustment period.
Yeah.
Adjustment periods are a part of this. They're normal, regardless of how different parenting is. And so a lot of it comes down to first just respecting the other parent as somebody who cares about the child just as much as you. And they're going to do it differently, and that's going to be hard because we want to say, well, that's wrong.
Right.
My way's right, your way's wrong.
Yeah, right. Look at Giovanna.
Listen. With my perspective, I had just gotten saved, remember? So he doesn't come from a bad background. Mm-hmm. His family is really good, like they're really great people.
Yeah.
But again, he was in the street life. So he was living the street life where he was still drinking, still smoking, still doing whatever. I stopped all that. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't to say that, oh, I'm holier than thou and I'm better than you because I'm living life. It was just like, I'm trying to stay away from that.
Yeah.
And so as I was raising my daughter, the music changed, the atmosphere changed, the way I spoke to her changed, the way I disciplined her changed. All these things started to change. And then she'll go there and it will be completely different. And she didn't like it. And I, and he would wonder why she was being combative. And I'm like, I don't do that here. Like I had to tell him, I don't curse at her. I don't, I don't do this and I don't do that. That's just not the way I parent anymore. Like that's just not my style. And so that was a big thing for me because it was challenging because of her. And, and then me, I was in the ministry at this point. I was serving ministry for years. Mm-hmm. And there was a time where she had gotten baptized and she was on fire for God. I'm talking about on fire. Never seen this fire before in my life.
Wow.
And a couple of weeks later, she was going to New Jersey. And everything within me said, don't send her. But I had to abide by the legal court and I had to send her. And they were like, you have to trust that God will sustain this passion for her. Mm-hmm. I mean, for him. And when she left, she came back, the fire was gone. Wow. And it broke my heart. I was like, but she knows God. She's a great kid, despite of despite of the different households and a different upbringing and it's not like like I said, he's not a bad guy. It's just it was completely different the way we did things. She's a great kid. I mean, she's an A student. I mean, GPA is off the charts. So I would say if you're in God, everybody's, I'm sure all your listeners are all different.
Yeah.
If you're in Christ, trust God. You can't control everything. As much as we want to control everything, we can't. We have to allow God to do what he's going to do. And, if you're not in Christ, then you still have to trust that whatever you're teaching them, it's a seed and it's eventually going to take root. And as they grow, they'll say, my mom taught me this, my dad taught me that. And eventually it'll manifest and bloom. It's just trust. I would say trust.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I thought about the scripture that says, train them up in the way they should go. When they're older, they won't depart from it. So I just thought that just popped into my spirit when you said that. So Javonna, thank you. I'm sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
No, that's all right. I just wanted to add the caveat that we're assuming that everybody's in a safe situation. It's always important just to be listening for those things where it might not be a safe situation. Yeah. And at that point, you do need to bring in other people who can help, because you're probably not going to be the one who's going to be able to handle that with your former or with the child's parents.
Yeah.
Keeping an ear out for that. Yeah, keeping an ear out for that, but then knowing that if they are saved, like you said, just trust him. Trust God.
Yes.
He cares about your kids more than you do even.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's so good, just to kind of, even recap what you're saying as far as trusting God when it comes to our kids, because like you just said, Kristen, he knows them better than we do. He loves them more than we do. And so I think it's so important that even whenever, they go to the other parent's house. And I think we said it earlier, even about just giving the other parent grace, because like you said, Kristen, if there's a situation where bedtime is 9:00 at my house, but midnight over there, is it putting the kid in danger? You know what I mean? Or is it just a difference of parenting styles? And so I think it's important that you keep the main thing. So, like you said, if they're safe and, there's no mistreatment, then I think that, just kind of giving the other parent grace, like you said. So
easier said than done, but absolutely important.
Listen, I watch, of course I'm on the outside looking in for a lot of these conversations, but then I have friends who come to me and I'll be like, girl, I don't know, I'm not a mom, but just venting, because these are real life situations where it's like, oh, and then it's, oh, well, my ex-husband now has a girlfriend and the kids doesn't like the girl. So it's so many moving parts when it comes to co-parenting. And, me just trying to be that friend that, saying, listen, build up my friend who's, the other co-parent, or, then it's, finances. If you can't buy what this parent can. So it's a lot when it comes to it. But I think even if we don't, didn't touch on all of it, I think one thing that we do have to understand is communication. Not just communicating with the child, but with the other parent. And like you said, learning their communication style. Because, if he's a texter, then maybe that's the best way to communicate. If they're a person that likes to talk and they're not going to respond to your text messages, stop texting them and getting mad when they don't respond and then y'all are arguing. So I think it's so important, just for the people who are listening, pay attention to what their communication style is. Give them grace whenever they mess it up or they don't do things exactly the way that you do. Implement boundaries. That's so important when it comes to co-parenting. So keeping the child's best interest in the forefront. Don't use the child as a messenger. These are all important things that you guys brought up tonight. And I'm so glad about it, because I know that our listeners, have received a plethora of information on tonight. So I'm so glad that you guys brought your expertise to the table. So I'm going to ask that y'all give some parting advice as well. But one thing I am curious to know, and I'll start with Javonna. What do you think the most important thing that you have learned about yourself when it comes to co-parenting?
I think what I've learned about myself is I really have to have patience, learning patience, because, and that goes along with the grace, but the patience, because it's like you said, not everybody's parenting style is the same.
Yeah.
We all have different parenting styles, and we want to do things our way, and we don't kind of want to compromise or budge because we feel like our way is better. And we're all learning, we're all growing. And I even just had a conversation with him the other day, which is crazy because our conversation has completely evolved, like our relationship or whatever you want to call it, because we're not in a relationship. But we have a better communication style because we both learned, we both grew. And I've learned to have more patience. I pay attention to people, I observe people.
Yeah.
And because it's not that I don't like confrontation, because I'm very confrontational. However, I don't want to argue. Like, I want peace in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody wants peace in their life. So what I learned about myself is I'm a very great observer, and I need to learn how to be more patient in the parenting style. And I also learned that most of the hard time, like the hard time that I gave him at the beginning, came from a place of unforgiveness. A lot of the situations are 9 times out of 10, the separation is coming from a place of, just things didn't work out and everyone's upset, right? There's rarely a time where you both just say, you know what, let's just end this.
Right.
And so a lot of it came from me just being upset. And it wasn't because I obviously ended it with him, so I couldn't be upset with him regarding that. But it was the fact that he really helped at that time. I never really got the support that I needed. And so I held that against him for a long time, until one day I was just like, you know what? I have to forgive him. Because he's, he was doing what he was doing at that point in time, and he tried. Now he's doing something different. He's evolved as a person. Now he's actually giving more. He's reaching out more. He's doing more. And so having that place of forgiveness. So I realized that unforgiveness really places a burden on co-parenting. If you're not willing to forgive, then then don't expect your co-parenting to go with ease. There's always going to be some conflict and confrontation. Like, it's going to be a restriction. So I would say.
Wow. That is so good, Giovanna, when you talked about the forgiveness piece, because we just did a show, a couple weeks ago about forgiveness and how much unforgiveness blocks. So when it comes to even your own life, and when it comes to relationships, I'm so glad that you brought that up. So I just really hope that our listeners take that in and really kind of do some self-inventory. Try to figure out if you're holding unforgiveness with that, your ex partner, because that could affect how you raise your child. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. And Kristen, even when it comes to you, when you're working with your clients, when it comes to trying to help them navigate the co-parenting, is there any takeaways or anything that you've learned, when it comes to helping them, or even how, in comparison to maybe even what you experienced as a child being in a co-parenting situation?
Absolutely. First, I just wanted to comment on Giovanna, your beautiful description of what it means to forgive, and how it's not that somebody even asked for it, that came from you. And that was you releasing any bitterness in your heart and just saying, you know what, you may owe me a debt, but I'm not going to collect on it.
Right.
And being able to just release that, which was completely a choice on your own. I love that. Latasha, what you guys are talking about, boundaries. Boundaries are one of my favorite topics because they're so misunderstood. And I think coming through my own journey is really about me developing boundaries and really understanding what that is. So, people say, oh, I put up a boundary about this. I'm like, great. How'd you enforce it? They're like, what?
Right.
Boundaries without enforcement mean nothing. It's like it's not even there. So people say, I got a boundary that nobody calls me after 9. Great. Why are you answering the phone?
Right. Yep.
So boundaries really helped me understand, first of all, what I'm responsible for and what I'm not responsible for. So boundaries around my own emotions, I'm responsible for. If I
Yeah,
get angry, that's mine. Nobody makes me angry. That's
correct.
mine. But in the same vein, I can't make anybody else angry. That's theirs. And so I don't have to fall all over myself trying to manage their emotions because that's theirs to manage.
Yeah.
And so really understanding that line between what's mine and what's theirs has helped me be able to be closer in relationship, because when somebody's upset, I know what steps I have to take and what steps I don't have to take. And then I can also enforce it. If somebody comes into my space, if somebody tries to do something that I feel like is going to make me better, I don't want that bitterness in our relationship. So I can cut that off and say, you know what, because I care about us, I won't. That's a no
Wow.
because I care.
Wow. That is
That's
so true. That is so true. I think, even gosh, what is the point of a boundary if you're not enforcing it? Wow. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, even when it relates to, co-parenting, there has to be a certain level of boundaries when it comes within yourself with the other parent. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. That is part of the art of co-parenting. So I'm glad that we had this conversation on tonight. Even as we get ready to wrap this up, I know that even after we finish, we may have some listeners who may have more questions, who may want to know more information, because you guys are the experts on tonight. You guys are the ones with the real life experiences when it comes to navigating co-parenting, or when it comes to helping people from on a professional standpoint, when it comes to co-parenting, and so many other things. I want my audience to be able to reach out to you if they need some additional support, if they need some additional tools or strategies, or if they just need to, talk to someone as far as when it comes to how to deal with themselves, how to deal with the child, how to deal with the other parent. So I want you guys to kind of let people know how they can reach you, what your specific services are, how you can be of assistance to anyone who's tuned in. So Giovanna, I'll start with you. Just kind of give some people, your background, what you do, how they can reach out to you, etc.
okay. So yes, you can reach me on. I want to say my email, but I'm going to give you just this email because it's easier. It's Giovanna. It's my first and last name at gmail.com. I'd like to keep it simple.
Yeah. We like
um,
that.
so you can reach me on Facebook, Instagram, or you can just email me. I am a life coach and mental health coach. So I primarily do self-development and help you overcome any mental obstacles that you may be facing. Again, boundaries, emotional intelligence, things like that, because that's really important when you're navigating
Oh,
co-parenting.
yes. Yes.
So that's how you can reach me, giovannacirillo at gmail.com. And yeah.
Awesome. And Kristen, how can someone reach out to you if they need some additional support? We know that you are the expert, the guru when it comes to the art of co-parenting, when it comes to marriage and family and all of that. So how can our audience reach out to you if they need some additional support?
Latasha, you're so kind. I am a big believer in therapy because yeah, I'm a little biased. I am a therapist, but I'm a big believer in coming and having that one-on-one and developing that relationship with somebody who can really get to know your specific circumstances. And licensure wise, I'm only licensed to practice in the state of Kansas. So I would encourage anyone to reach out to a therapist who specializes in that in your area, in your
Right.
state. And Psychology Today is a great way to do that. But if you are just looking for some tips, looking for some resources, I have a website where I do have some of that under resources tab. And you're always welcome to reach out to me. I read books. I have podcasts. One of my favorite books is by Isolina Ricci about, it's called Mom's House, Dad's House. It's a great read for anyone who's navigating this.
Okay.
So you're welcome to hit me up at anchorofhope.com. I'm glad to provide those kinds of resources, or just help you get connected with a therapist in your area who would be able to help you with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen. We are all about mental health here. If anyone who has been following our podcast, and We are all about faith, family, friendship, and a whole lot of mental health. We recently just did a show on how folks can navigate if for some reason they don't know how to find a therapist. And I'm so glad you mentioned psychology today. We talked about that on one of our previous shows, because we do believe that sometimes you just need that additional support. Sometimes you might be in crisis. Sometimes you might just need maintenance. Sometimes you just need a listening ear. And I'm a supporter of all of it. So I'm so glad that we had you on the show tonight, Kristen, from, just that therapist standpoint. You gave a lot of amazing information, gave our audience a lot to think about. Same for you, Giovanna. Your testimony, how you've just navigated that co-parenting space, how the journey has evolved. And so I'm so glad that you are a testament to someone in our audience who may be, at that beginning stage and like, oh my God, what do I have to look forward to? Maybe their child is 6 and, they're looking at you and like, oh, her daughter's 16. They were able to do it. We all know that no situation is the same, but at least tonight we've provided them with some tips, some tools, and some strategies on how to navigate that space. So I want to thank everyone who supports the Unmuted Conversations podcast. As you all know, I am on Instagram at unmuted_conversations. I am also on Spotify, YouTube at Unmuted Conversations. So please follow me there. I would love to have you join me here. Also, if you are interested in being a guest on my show, you can always email me at unmutedconversations@gmail.com. Let's just conversate. Let's see if we're a good fit for each other. I would love to have you on our show. I'm so glad for everyone who tunes in to me. I try to come on every Thursday. Thank you guys for your support. I appreciate it. Thank you once again, Giovanna and Kristen. You guys are amazing.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that you took some time out of your busy schedule on tonight to join me. You guys have been such an amazing asset to my show, and I don't know how to thank you enough. So thank you.
It was fun.
Yes.
It was wonderful meeting you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
for
much.
providing this service.
Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching us on tonight. To all of my listeners, thank you. And I will see you all again soon. Good night.
Bye.